This morning, we're continuing our series in James, thinking about being runners in a race, being ready, being set, which is the theme we're in at the moment, so that we can go and be disciples in our lives. And so being set is about thinking about how we set ourselves in the truth. A little bit like races in a starting block, we kind of set ourselves ready to spring forwards. And so James is a great guide for that. And this morning we're going to think about true and false wisdom. I want to talk kind of broadly about wisdom. I think the passage kind of speaks for itself. So we're going to be able to kind of dig a bit deeper and go a bit further in some ways than the passage says. And I want to talk a bit about how we experience wisdom maybe already, and how we can experience wisdom. Both all in our minds, in our kind of feelings, our emotions, our hearts, and then also in our bodies, in our how we can experience wisdom in our bodies. And so I want to read James 3, if you want to find it, you're more than welcome. James 3:13 to 18, and then we can dive in. So James 3:13 to 18. Who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in humility that comes from wisdom. But if you harbour bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth. Such wisdom does not come down from heaven, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder and every evil practice. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. Peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness. This is the word of the Lord. And so I want to start by asking, what is wisdom? And it's quite hard, I think, to define wisdom without just kind of penning it into one type of wisdom, one sphere of wisdom. This passage gives us a really good insight. But what I want to say at the outset is wisdom isn't just knowing and thinking the right things. It's not just about making good decisions. This James passage kind of separates the wisdom of the earth, which is kind of, to describe kind of the wisdom that's achieved from a kind of force of will. It's achieved, we pull ourselves up, we kind of learn lots, and we kind of have lots of experience. That kind of wisdom of the earth that James talks about is suggesting that this kind of leads to a disorder and an evilness. Reading the passage, we can see that the word, the wisdom that James is describing is a lot like the fruit of the Spirit. If you can think of the list from Ephesians, it's gone out of my head, it's Ephesians 6, I think. Is that right? No one's shaking their head, so I'm going to say Galatians. Matt's not shaking his head because he was trying to remember too, that's great. From Galatians. That's fine, at the 10:30, no one will know, it'll be fine. The fruit of the Spirit from a book in the New Testament, where James is kind of describing this wisdom as kind of unselfish, unboasting, peace-loving, full of mercy. These kind of words are really reminiscent of the love, joy, peace, faithfulness, kindness that we see in that book in the New Testament. And James kind of describes this kind of impartiality, this kind of showing no favourites in wisdom, this sincerity, this honest, kind of authentic, natural quality of wisdom. And although that's really useful for building out an image of kind of what wisdom it looks like, what we're kind of doing here in some ways is kind of showing the colour of wisdom rather than showing what wisdom is. It's kind of like what wisdom does, what wisdom looks like as wisdom is enacted in our lives. There's this kind of living righteously that kind of comes from wisdom. But it's quite hard to figure out what wisdom actually is. So let's dig a bit deeper then into where wisdom comes from. And you might be familiar with the kind of the quote, the idea that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, comes from Proverbs. And this fear that's described, that's maybe quite familiar quote to us, is not a fear that's nervous or anxious. It's not a fear like a bad dream or a worry. It's not an insecure fear, but more of an awe, a kind of reverence of God. It's about recognizing God, giving God God's rightful place, recognizing God as Almighty, remembering that God is provider, and then fully relying on God for guidance and for truth. And so wisdom comes from this as the starting place, this place of awe, kind of fear and reverence of God. But wisdom is also a gift. In the Old Testament, in Kings, it kind of retells a story of Solomon. And Solomon, you might know, is the son of David. And I want to just read some of the words that are recorded here, because I think it's really interesting what Solomon says to God in, I think it's 1 Kings 3. So here we go. So starting from verse 5. At Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Simeon during the night in a dream, and God said, "Ask for what you want me to give you." Solomon answered, "You have shown great kindness to your servant, my father David, because he was faithful to you and righteous and upright in heart. You've continued this great kindness to him and have given him a son to sit on his throne every day, this very day." This is verse 7. "Now, Lord my God, you have made your servant king in place of my father David, but I am only a little child and I do not know how to carry out my duties. Your servant is here among the people you have chosen, a great people, too numerous to count or number. So give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people and to distinguish between right and wrong. For who is able to govern this great people of yours?" So Solomon's words, I think, are really interesting. Solomon trusted that only God could equip him for the task in front of him. And what do we learn here from Solomon? He kind of lowers himself. I am but a child. Who can do this but you? Who can do this? And we kind of see this in the James passage. This wisdom that Solomon's kind of asking for starts with this kind of submissive, humble thing before God, a kind of awe before God. And his prayer is worshipful. Again, Solomon is saying to God, calling to mind all the things that God has done, the kindness God has shown him and his dad, David. And again, this is found in James's kind of direction, this kind of description of wisdom, that Solomon is coming to God to fulfill Solomon's duty, saying, "Help me fulfill the duty that I have." And again, James, it's about peace loving, about doing the things that we have in front of us. It's not about pulling ourselves up. It's not about this kind of earthly effort towards wisdom, but about saying to God, "I want to trust you with the thing that's right in front of me. I want to trust you with the task that you've given me." And so, kind of in summary of this kind of first part of the talk, I want to just say that we see clearly in James that this gift that is given to Solomon in this story, it comes from heaven, as James describes it, and this wisdom that is given looks like, as it's outplayed, looks like the kind of loving, gentle, righteous living that we see described elsewhere. And it might just sound like we're talking about right living again, but I want to kind of highlight, we're kind of showing the colour of the thing, not necessarily its description. It's really hard to pin down what wisdom is, but James here is describing, I think, what wisdom kind of looks like, what it does when it is being kind of practiced among us. So I kind of want to step away from the idea that wisdom is like an object that we kind of possess, but something that we enact in our day-to-day lives. It's not about describing what this thing is that we can take hold of necessarily. It's about showing, actually, what is wise living. It looks like righteous living. That's what it is. And so James is describing kind of what wisdom does. And so I want to kind of now transition to the second half, which is to think about how we might experience wisdom today as it's enacted in our lives, both personally in ourselves, in our minds, our hearts, our bodies, but also in our kind of community a bit too. And I want to share kind of vulnerably about my experience, even just this last week, with experiencing this kind of knowing wisdom in my body. And so I want to kind of fly through these different spheres of mind, of kind of heart, and kind of emotional aspects, and then kind of finally think about the wisdom that we have in our bodies, our physical bodies. And so starting with mind, this is, I think, often how we think about wisdom, and we experience wisdom as our thoughts. Sometimes maybe when you think of a wise person, they maybe are really good at discerning and choosing the right choice. Solomon, for example, is a really good example of this. He's asking God to help him basically weigh up different options to make decisions on behalf of other people. And this is great wisdom that we have access to. We can kind of ask God for in our minds. For some of us, maybe this morning, we know that we've got that in our minds. We're good at thinking things through. Maybe God has already given us some of that gift, and we want to maybe invite God to give us more of that, because it's really, really great to be part of a community of people who are discerning and who are able to think things through well. But you also might feel like, actually, I can think of other people that have this kind of wisdom, this kind of mental wisdom, and I kind of want to desire that from God. And again, I want to suggest that this isn't an object that's given to us, but a thing that is enacted in our lives. And so part of this kind of mental wisdom, this mind wisdom, is about putting God in God's rightful place, keeping God in focus, and remaining in awe of God. And so I don't want to dwell too long on the mind, because I feel like that's the one we think of a lot of the time. I want to kind of move on to the emotional kind of heart side of things. You might already experience wisdom in your emotions, in your heart, and you might know these feelings. And this type of wisdom might show up like as a felt sense inside you. Maybe you can't really measure or describe, but sometimes you have joy that needs to come out of you, or sometimes you have a kind of uneasiness inside you that kind of tells you something about what you're experiencing. It tells you something about your surroundings, a situation, a person. Maybe there's a sadness sometimes that comes over you when someone else is sharing their story, and this kind of empathy, this kind of almost God-given empathy kind of rises up in you. This type of wisdom is a gift to the individual, to you, to me, but it is also a gift to us as a church. As Christians, we're kind of called, invited to weep with those who weep and rejoice with those who rejoice. And there's something really, I think, really important to remember about this, is that we are invited as Christians to be partiers with people that are partying. It's not just about kind of being neutral. It's not just about being a middle ground. It's actually about finding people that are rejoicing and rejoicing with them, and finding people that are weeping and weeping with them, coming alongside people in their seasons. And that's good news, especially if you're an emotional person and you want to kind of experience those emotions. There's a kind of wisdom in being able to do that, and being able to carry other people and be with other people in great moments of high rejoicing, and also in moments of weeping. And so growing in wisdom in this area, and noticing maybe that we want to kind of grow in this area, is about, rather than again asking God for an object of wisdom to give to us in our emotions, it's about surrendering our emotions to God. I think those that rejoice with those who are rejoicing aren't always necessarily in a rejoicing season. It's about choosing to align our emotions, our heart, with God's heart. And again, I want to just clarify, surrendering our emotions to God isn't like becoming super religious. It's not about being neutral and quiet. Surrendering our emotion to God sometimes looks like weeping. It sometimes looks like rejoicing. And surrendering to God with our emotions is not about letting go of how we feel in a moment or anything like that. It's about recognizing that our emotions doesn't have the final say. There's a wisdom in our emotions to say to God, it's over to you, God. I'm feeling these things. Maybe you're talking to me, God. Recognizing that God may be speaking to us through our emotions, but it's not about totally just throwing them away. God is using our emotions and the kind of wisdom that God has given us in our heart to sense and feel him and our surroundings. And so before I move on to body, I want to just clarify. I've split these into like 3 categories, 3 areas, 3 spheres. But I want to just clarify that you can't just be one of these things. It's like trying to be a head without being a hand. We are all of those things. We are all of those things all at the same time. So we are minds and bodies and hearts all at the same time. There's this kind of integrated whole and a kind of major overlap. So as I share a bit about kind of body, and I want to share vulnerably for some realizations that I've had this week, I want to just recognize that this realization, being raw, is yes in my body, but it's also in my heart, it's also in my head. It's all of these things together. So it's not a neat, easy distinctions between each one. And so I want to share a bit about my experience this week. And I want to start by saying there's loads of research that I'm not going to quote here, that I've read some of previously and some this week, that point to how our experiences in our bodies is so interconnected with our experiences in our mind, our thoughts, our emotions, all these types of things. And I want to say that your body holds wisdom and experiences and remembers them when your mind or your heart can't do that. This week, Rebbe and I were having an argument, very, very normal argument, just miscommunications about silly things. And I was feeling really sad, really stirred up, really struggling to find a way through this argument that we were having, we weren't able to quite find peace with each other. And I was feeling really kind of downcast, really depressed, really stressed about this. And I really couldn't shake it. And I was really confused. I was really trying to think about what is going on for me. And I realized I was feeling this kind of heavy feeling in my body that I found it really hard to describe. So that was my experience this week. For the past 18 months, I've had slip discs in my lower back. And so I've been struggling with nerve pain down the kind of my left leg. And knowing that is nerve pain, and then having this experience this week really gave me new insight into what is going on for me in my body. This heavy feeling I was feeling this week, I realized was nerve pain, which is odd. I've not got slip discs in my elbows, but it was everywhere. I was feeling pain in my elbows, pain in my shoulders, pain in my neck, pain in my knees, everywhere. I was feeling this kind of strange, emotional kind of turmoil, heaviness in my body. And I realized that this is a feeling that I have felt before and I've not had words for, and having nerve pain, a definite nerve pain in my back, has helped me reveal this kind of wisdom that was locked inside my body. That this is a feeling that I've had at school, this is a feeling I can remember having as a kid. And I want to just kind of say that I'm mid-process with this stuff. But this experience this week has shown me that actually, even in this kind of slightly, not trivial, but temporary stress that I was feeling in a disagreement with Rebbe, it really revealed some things about my past experiences. My ups and my downs at school and as a kid and growing up. And there was this kind of, I was able to go back in some ways, in a more real and stronger sense than I could have done without my body having this feeling, without this kind of physical experience. And the reason why I call this wisdom is I think that God has given us experiences in our bodies, physical experiences. You might have physical memory in your body that you can't kind of think about, but you can experience in your fingers, in your toes. I think God has given us those feelings so that we can kind of unlock greater levels of healing, that God can invite us into greater levels of freedom. And as I say, this is raw and fresh. I don't know what I'm going to do with this new insight that I've had about myself. I don't know what that's going to unearth. I have no idea. And I know that for some people this is going to feel like a big thing. Maybe you already know what I'm talking about. Maybe you don't know what I'm talking about, and that's totally fine too. But there's this kind of knowing in my physical body, in my skeleton, in my skin, in my muscles, that my mind and my heart couldn't access and didn't know. But I know that God has given us wisdom to know and to reach out for him. God comes close and makes a way for us to receive healing, to receive freedom. And sometimes that freedom just comes from realizing. Sometimes that freedom comes from moving around, shaking the feeling off. And sometimes that doesn't go away very quickly. And sometimes we need to do other things, more work, talk about it, process together. And so we can bring this to God. I think God gives us this wisdom in our bodies so we can bring this wisdom to God. We can bring this knowledge, this knowing to God. And so I want to invite you. I know this is a big thing. I know this is a big thing in a space that maybe you don't know if you can kind of experience that in. And I want to kind of just recognise that this is a big topic. And for me, this is, as I'm sharing my experiences this week, it's a big topic for me. I don't know what's going on in this, but I know that God is trustworthy. I know that God is kind. I know that God wants freedom for us, healing for us. And again, I go back to this description of the fear of the Lord. If you're feeling fearful, remember God is not scary. God is kind. We come to God in awe and wonder. Elsewhere in the Bible it says that where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. And so I want to just pray as we can just sing.